Hi there, and welcome to the webinar today hosted by QuestionPro. My name is Esther Lavielle, and I will be the presenter for Correlation Analysis 101, a farm-to-table overview. This overview will feature the basics of correlation analysis. Our goal for this webinar is to make you feel confident in knowing what correlation analysis is and how to start applying it to your current market research strategy. I'm a big fan of the farm-to-table movement where I live because it's all about getting great produce right from the source. And I believe this webinar is all about cutting out the fancy words and giving you information that's easy to understand and use right away, right from the source. For your participation in today's webinar, we will be sending everyone who's attending from beginning to end a certificate of participation, showing you are more knowledgeable about the correlation analysis and how to analyze your research results with your new knowledge you just gained. And before we get started, let me tell you more about QuestionPro. We've been in the business since 2005. And we have well over 100 employees with offices around the world in the US, India, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, and Dubai. Over 70% of our clients have moved from a competing platform with a 100% implementation success rate. And we also offer an agile suite of market research solutions that address customer needs, employees, panel management, and sample. And our partner base includes anywhere from agencies, nonprofits, universities, corporations, government, and more. So if you're new to QuestionPro, I want to welcome you today and feel free to reach out with any further questions or comments, and my marketing team and I will follow up with you. So let's get started. On today's agenda, we will be going over what is correlation analysis. What's the difference between correlation and regression analysis, the whys and pitfalls of correlation analysis, when to use it, analytics and best practices, and also setting up correlation analysis in QuestionPro and a quick demo. And since this is a farm-to-table overview, I thought it would be fun to feature farm animals to help me explain this research methodology when it comes to understanding correlation analysis. Of the animals that you see on the screen, which ones are most closely related and least related to each other? All of these animals are ones that you may find on a farm. However, some of them are more closely related to each other than others. And correlation analysis can be thought of as these animals. It's all about relationships and how strong the relationship is between them. So in a nutshell, correlation analysis studies the closeness of relationships between two or more variables, and it is used to describe the linear relationship between two continuous variables. And for market research, it is a bivariate analysis that measures the strength of association between two variables and the direction of the relationship. So with our farm example, although they can be on the same farm and eat the same kind of food, pigs and chickens probably have a lower correlation in comparison to ducks and chickens, as we see on the left, since they're both birds. However, eggs and baby chicks are probably more closely related to the adult chicken. And between baby chicks and eggs, chicks are baby versions of the adult chicken, while the egg is just an embryo of the chicken. So in this case, baby chicks are most correlated to chickens out of all of them. I know this is kind of silly, but it's a great analogy to grasp the basics of the correlation analysis methodology. And when it comes to correlation analysis, the relationship of the correlation will give a direction, which is either positive or negative in nature. A positive correlation means that as one variable increases, the other one does as well. And a negative correlation means that when one variable increases, the other one decreases. So a good example of one that increases is that farmers who utilize more farming technology, which is variable 1, can farm larger sizes of fields or larger field sizes, and that would be considered a positive correlation. The difference between correlation analysis and regression analysis. While we're promoting this webinar, we got a few questions from folks asking what the difference between correlation analysis and regression and when to use either one. I decided to go ahead and put together a brief side-by-side table that explains the differences and when to know to use either one. It is fairly common for analysts to use both correlation and regression analysis depending on what answers you're looking for. On this table, you can see that we are comparing correlation analysis to regression analysis by definition, its use case, what it indicates, and its objective. So with correlation analysis, again, it determines a correlationship or association or absence of a relationship of two or more variables, whereas the regression analysis predicts the value of the dependent variable based on the known variable of the independent variable, assuming that average mathematical relationship between the two or more variables. For the use case, generally speaking, with correlation analysis, it usually represents a linear relationship between two variables, and so when it graphs, it usually creates a line of some sort. With regression analysis, it is to find a best fit line and estimate one variable on the basis of another variable. So the variables are contingent upon each other with regression analysis. And what it indicates for correlation analysis is the extent of which two variables move together strength-wise, and in regression analysis, it indicates the impact of a unit change in the known variable and on the estimated variable. So again, those are directly related to each other, and the results are contingent on the other variable. The objective for correlation analysis is to find a numerical value expressing the relationship between variables -1, 0, and +1. And then with regression analysis, the objective is to estimate the values of random variables on the basis of the values of fixed variables. So a great example to see what that is for correlation analysis, farmers who utilize more farming technology can farm larger field sizes. And for an example for regression analysis, based on what farmers made in the years past, they can estimate their total earnings for the following year, assuming that, nothing else has changed. So those you will see that a lot of things are more contingent upon certain items that must happen with regression analysis, and there's more concrete variables that are being used, whereas with correlation, we're really looking at the strength and what direction it is going at. So we're going to talk about why correlation analysis, what it is, what is it about it that is so popular, and why do people use it? I thought this quick Dilbert comic would be a great thing to showcase, and I thought it was really funny. So the guy says, I did a statistical analysis and found no correlation between my efforts and my rewards, and I felt adrift in a sea of randomness and desperate and absurd, devoid of purpose, lost. And then I got paid and I purchased some unnecessary merchandise, and now I feel fine. And I think that's just a really funny way to see how people analyze and review and process the correlation. And we do that in our everyday lives without realizing it. So one of the things that correlation can do and why it's important in market research is because, it does point market researchers towards better questions to ask. And it also allows us to identify strong to weaker relationships between variables. And it can be used to drill down, analysis or look at, specific segments of respondents. So if you need to look at different genders, males and females, to see, how, what kind of relationship they have with the different responses that they've given, correlation analysis can certainly give you that. And you can also see different relationships between, different answers that are given, in any kind of closed-ended question. And also strong correlations may be as close as market researchers can get to establishing that critical variable that underlies other variables in question. So what that really means is that, you can get very close to causation, but you're not quite doing causation. And so we will discuss that in the next slide. And that is called the pitfalls of correlation analysis. I found another really funny Dilbert comic, which says, some of the most famous geniuses in the world slept only 4 hours per night. I'm doing 4 hours a night too, because you know what they say, correlation is the same as causation. And everybody knows, no one says that. Oh, right, I should take the word of the oversleeper. So I thought that was really funny. And one of the biggest things that, scientists, market researchers, and everybody and statisticians, this is kind of drilled into our heads, and it's something that, if there's anything you need to learn from this webinar, it's correlation does not imply causation. It gets you really close, but it does not imply it. The other thing about it is that it does not prove that one variable can affect another variable. One of the pitfalls of correlation analysis is that it is one of the most abused statistical measures. Is that we can take it all the way and make it seem that this is the cause, but really it's not. So when you look at the why correlation analysis, it does allow you to ask more questions and to get down to the root and get very close to causation, but it does not give you causation. And the last thing in terms of pitfalls of correlation analysis is, correlation only measures the strength of linear relationships, and it does not necessarily imply a relationship between the variables. Let's talk about when to use correlation analysis. You will want to use correlation analysis when you want to determine the possible association between two variables. Again, that is the definition of what correlation analysis is. So, the question that you'll want to ask is how much of a relationship is there and what is the strength of the relationship? So if you are going to look at, particular items such as a mother or a adult feeding chickens versus a child feeding a chicken, will want to ask, what is the health of the chickens, when the adult feeds them versus the child, is there anything there? So what you'll want to do is measure the correlation coefficient, which will come out with a number between -1 and +1, and it's calculated to represent the linear dependence between the two variables or sets of data. So, a lot of questions can be answered, and, if you're finding that, like, the chickens are laying eggs at different times than they're normal, and perhaps you can look and see, is it because the child is feeding them differently than the mother? What can they do to be on the same feeding schedule so that the chickens can lay eggs on a regular basis and be healthy and happy? The next one, when to use correlation analysis, is when you want to check for meaningful or fluke relationships. If you are a carrot farmer and all of a sudden you grew a bushel of blue carrots, out of nowhere, you're going to wonder, how did that happen, right? So correlation analysis will help with testing the significance of a relationship and find out if this correlation is a meaningful relationship or just a fluke. If you're someone who is pursuing growing blue carrots, then this is great. You'll probably want to duplicate it and grow it as much as possible. If you're someone that's only growing orange carrots and all of a sudden you got blue, then obviously you'll want to know why. With this meaningful check, you'll be wanting to do some significant testing of the correlation analysis. And you'll want to pair these things with a sample size, a decent sample size. Obviously, the larger the better. You'll also want to look at weighting or balancing the data that you have collected. And you can do this based on the profiles that other responses collected. And also you can look at the number of questions and responses reviewed at the same time. All of those things can influence the meaning of your correlation and also the strength of the relationships when you're looking at correlation analysis. The other time to look at correlation analysis is when you want to look at seeing that it does help to analyze the cause and effect relationship, if there is one. I feel like this is, again, the greatest debate, next to what came first, the chicken or the egg. So can correlation help find cause and effect? The answer is, and I've looked up this, with a bunch of, I looked on the internet and asked a few people, and did some research, and from my school days, the answer is possibly, maybe, but mostly no, which I think is kind of funny. But keep in mind, the popular saying, correlation, again, does not imply causation. So, definitely beware. There might be some cause and effect relationship, but you have to be very careful with kind of pushing it. The main thing is that we are focused on the strength of relationships only. And a correlation between variables does not automatically mean that the change in one variable is the cause of the change in the value of another variable. And so a causal relationship between two only exists if the occurrence of the first variable causes the other one to change. And so it's important to know the difference, and it's important to know that, it can be very, very close, but don't take it all the way if you can't. So again, think of this as the chicken or egg debate, with correlation analysis, and, just be very cautious when you use cause and effect relations as the reason to do correlation analysis. I know this sounds like I'm repeating myself, but it's important to remember that correlation will guide researchers with asking further questions. So you get close to causation, but there is no correlation calculation that can predict causation. But it doesn't mean it's not useful for research. Again, just don't abuse it. And I will hang that up for now and move on to the next thing. All right, let's talk about analytics and the analytics for correlation analysis. There are 4 methods to measure and analyze correlations. The first one is the scatter diagram method. And, based on the study of the graphs, the values for each pair of variables are plotted on a graph and observed to a degree of correlation denoted as R. This is basically the simplest form to study correlation. It's purely observational. The more points scattered over the chart, the lower the correlation. The more points plotted that are closer to the line, the higher the degree of the correlation. I would say this is probably one that doesn't require any mathematics. It's purely visual. It's probably one that, we can do quickly and easily. And basically, to do this, you can, download the data, the raw data that you receive from QuestionPro, and you can, build out your own graphs using the, standard X and Y axis for the results, and responses for each person that answers particular questions, and then go from there. So that's usually what people will do, like an Excel spreadsheet or an SPSS, if they want to use that method for correlation. The second one is the Pearson correlation coefficient. This is the most popular one, most extensively used quantitative method to measure correlation, and basically it is a mathematical method used to calculate the degree and direction of the relationship between linear related values. And so again, R is the relationship or correlation result, that is the output, and the correlation is always -1, 0 to +1. And the variables and linears are, independent of each other. And so it will show you whether or not the strength is strong or weak, regardless, if you put these variables together and other different variables within the research together. And I would say, you can use Pearson correlation coefficient by either downloading the data from QuestionPro and putting it into a tool that it runs it, such as, Excel does it, also SPSS and other, tools like Tableau and other analytics tools that can easily mark these and measure these out for you with the Pearson output. The third one is the one that we actually program in our system, which is the Spearman-Rowe. And it is a non-parametric test. Keep in mind the Pearson correlation coefficient is a parametric test. Non-parametric tests used to measure the strength of association between two variables, where R with a positive 1 equals a positive correlation, and R equals -1 means a negative correlation. So the results for Spearman-Rowe and Pearson are similar. It's going to be -1, 0, +1. And the test does not carry any assumptions about the distribution of the data, and it substitutes all values with their ranks, based on the number of responses. And we actually do that in the back end. And the Spearman-Rowe test is used, uses ordinal data to show preferences. And so when you get the data from the back end, generally speaking, everyone thinks, oh, well, it has to be a rank order question in order for this to give you a decent output. But actually that's not the case, and we can actually create a algorithm that automatically ranks based off of the number of responses that you get, and you'll receive a overall correlation coefficient that you can use, and the output is strikingly very close to what you get with the Pearson correlation coefficient. And the last one that we have that I think is used here and there is the method of least squares. And that's a mathematical method that tells the degree of correlation between the variables by using the square root of the product of the two regression coefficients. So basically what happens is that they will, get the sum of the y's and the x's and then do a square root of it. And then based off of that, they'll get a calculation that will show what is the best fit on the x and y axis. And it's also known as the line of best fit, and it calculates the mean and the value and the mean of the y values all together, and do a square root and mark all those on a graph as well. And usually people will use that as a way to kind of get an indication of what the line, where the line should start and end. And so that is one that you can actually select as a method when you are using Excel's SPSS and everything. But like I said, most people out of all of these do use the Pearson correlation coefficient. But if you are looking for something that's more click and go, we do have at QuestionPro the Spearman-Rowe correlation coefficient output that I will be showcasing in a bit, that shows you how easy it is to get the same or similar results. So let's talk about some best practices in terms of setting up a correlation analysis project. The first one is that you will want to use closed-ended question types. If you're using any open-ended questions and you want to use that for correlation, unfortunately, we cannot do it initially. There is a back-end way to do that. So if you want to recode those open-ended answers as closed-ended variables down the road, we can do that. But the easiest thing to do, if you want to keep that in mind and make this an easy process for you, is to create closed-ended question types. All the question types that are closed-ended can be supported and used for correlation analysis and calculated using Spearman-Rowe. The second thing is to keep track of a logic skip patterns or any of the logic skip patterns used within the survey, because when you are doing correlation analysis between different questions and you're looking at the response numbers and types, it really is dependent, how many people actually answered the question and what type of people answered it. And it would be based off of, logic skip patterns that you have along the way. So I recommend to go ahead and track all of those so you know that, at this point, if you had started with 100 people and you filtered, maybe 60 people had answered yes on a certain question and 40 answered no, you can see that the way that the output can be it could be different based off of the logic skip patterns you've applied. So keep track of those. Third one is to keep questions simple to reference for analytics. That just means that when you are, writing your questions, either code them properly so you know exactly what's what, or, write them in a way that's easy for you to reference so you know when you're looking at the chart what means what and what answers were applied to those particular questions or were included as part of those questions. Fourth thing is, keep the answer options short if possible. There is a thing in correlation analysis where they say if you have too many options, then the analysis or the number of, or, the ability for it to measure the relationship or the correlation between different variables can possibly go down. And also that will result in your need to be able to get, you'll need more sample or bigger sample size or respondent size in order to get a decent number in terms of correlation. And so if you can keep your answer options short, that would be great. If you can't, that's fine. Just keep in mind that, maybe at that point you may need to supplement with a larger respondent base in order to get good data to work with. Number 5 is, is this an ongoing or short-term project? I would say that, it's important to be able to track changes of correlation results over time for ongoing projects. If it's short-term, you get your results, that's it, the end. But I would say if you are looking at the changes of correlations, if the strength of variables do change, it is worth tracking, and we do have tracking tools available through QuestionPro. So let's go ahead and jump into a demo of a correlation analysis and how to do this in QuestionPro. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you about a real study that we had done earlier in the year. It is a 2018 market research trends survey by QuestionPro, and we wanted to know people's thoughts on buzzwords and trends that impact the market research industry. And we asked them what's most important for their business in 2018. And through that, we had over 598 views, 171 people started, and 110 people had completed the entire survey, giving us a 64% completion rate. And let's go ahead and look at the survey. So these are some of the questions that we had asked. And basically, the first step you'll want to do is create the survey in QuestionPro with some best practices noted in the previous slide or in slide 14, and field the survey to your desired respondent population. And so here's some of the questions we asked. How interested are you in watching and reading about market research trends? And we also asked them, here's a list of buzzwords that were trending in the market research industry over the past 5 years. We looked at gamification, consumerization, network intelligence, social media monitoring, panels, communities, user experience, mobile surveys, etc. From this list above, do you believe some of these trends are still trying to come to fruition, or has the time passed and it's no longer relevant? And so we had a series of closed-ended questions below, and captured their feedback on that. And then, of course, the other major big question that we asked in the survey is how important are the following for your business in 2018? So we wanted to know what matters to them this year, and what are some business goals that they're trying to reach. And so we brought it down to 3 things: building customer connections, increasing engagement with prospects and existing customers, and validating research to confirm qualitative and quantitative feedback. So let's go ahead and look at some of the results, because then that could, will actually help us with looking at the correlation analysis results. So here are the results given, and you can access this, after you have filled your survey and you go into reports and you go into dashboards. You can actually see this exact same infographic that you can use. So you can analyze the data here. You can download it and put it into a tool such as SPSS or Tableau and more. In this case, I have over 43 countries participating, and I have a fairly decent amount of people taking it on desktops, but I also have a few people on smartphones, about 25%, and less than 1% was on a tablet. However, it's very interesting to see where, what kind of people were taking this, and what the distribution was across the board. And then you can see, how interested are you in watching and reading about market research trends. So you can see the majority of our population that took the survey is very interested to somewhat interested, and then it drops down considerably to neutral to somewhat not interested. And keep in mind that I did survey market research administrators in QuestionPro, as well as those that are, that are interested in market research or does some form of market research. So I would say that market researchers don't get to do surveys, because we're always profiled out as soon as people ask them, are you involved in market research? You don't get to take surveys. You always get X'd out. But in my survey, I was like, yes, please take it. We're looking for you guys for your answers. And then next is, of course, here's the list of buzzwords that are trending. We just wanted to see what their attitude was about these things that were mentioned 5 years ago. Are they still coming? What's going on? And so you can see, 50% really still thought that a lot of, technology that we've been talking about over the last 5 years is still on its way. And a lot of, and then the other, almost 36% said that they're really not sure. They're not sure where it's going to go. And then, of course, there's others, the 9% has changed into something different. And then others thought it was not very relevant. But that piece of the pie is significantly smaller. And then, of course, the last question, building connections. Majority of people are looking to build better connections with their current customers, and also increasing engagement. And then, of course, validation research is not as important on the list compared to building customer connections or engagement, but it is something that people are considering, especially, in the world of fake news now, that everyone's trying to do validation research is becoming a more important topic. So it is something on market researchers' minds. So let's go ahead and do some more steps here. What you can do next is go into reports, and you click on advanced and select correlation analysis. And you do have the option to do a correlation analysis on 2 questions, either the first and second questions, or you can correlate all of the questions. And then after that, you generate the Spearman-Rho coefficient. And this is the output for 2 questions. And here you can see that we are looking at, how interested are you in watching market research trends versus the list of buzzwords and their attitude towards, where they think that is going. And you can see that, I had green circled the positive, so it's at 0.15. There is a positive correlation between market researchers who are interested in watching research trends and their feelings about market research buzzwords, saying that buzzword trends haven't arrived, but it's still on its way. So what that means to us is that there is a stronger relationship for those that do watch it, that do also believe that these items like gamification, consumerization, etc., is still coming. And here's the next one I did. I went ahead and correlated all the questions, as you can see on the top here. And you can see that I pointed out the highest positive correlation versus the lowest negative correlation. And you can see everything in between as well, including the one that I just did on the previous slide. So for the highest positive correlation between market researchers, it's market researchers who wish to improve or building their relationships and also increasing their engagement with their customers. That is the highest correlation. Not only do market researchers want to build relationships with their customers, they also want to increase their engagement, make it more personable along the way. And the lowest negative correlation is between researchers who watch market research trends and their wish to improve their level of engagement. So I thought that was really interesting that, for those that are, interested in trends, their level of engagement actually, actually has gone down just a bit. It means that the strength between, the answers there and the answers about trends is not quite as strong versus looking at building and engaging with customers. So that makes a lot of sense. And so this is what you can do when you use QuestionPro and the correlation tool with the Spearman-Rowe. And again, like I said, there's so many different ways that you can look at correlation analysis. And we do offer many flexible ways to use the data. The simplest way is really just point and click through what we offer. And you can go from there. And like I said, with the best practices of using close-ended question types and just being mindful of your sample size, the different kinds of things, that's really going to help you along the way. So let's go ahead and recap and talk about what is next. So again, correlation analysis measures the strength of association and its direction, either positive or negative correlation. And the biggest thing that you probably should know, that correlation does not imply causation. We can say that out loud, and probably we can make a song about it if we need to, but it can point market research towards asking better questions or better questions to ask. QuestionPro uses the Spearman-Rowe to calculate the correlation coefficient, but data can be downloaded to analyze using other correlation methodologies as seen in Excel, SPSS, Tableau, and more. So there's lots. You're not stuck with the one that we offer, but we do have it available, and it's very easy to use. And the fourth one, obviously, is to get started with us. If you have used QuestionPro, but you have never explored using correlation analysis, this is your chance. You must have a corporate license or higher. So if you got corporate, team, enterprise, if you also have the other tools such as communities, workforce, assessments, you do have access to that as well. So that allows you to get started. So again, I just want to thank you for spending time with me today to go over the correlation analysis, a farm to table overview. I hope that after this session, you feel like you can take this on. It makes so much more sense in that you probably may have already been doing this type of analysis without realizing it, and now you can go in and look at the data and use that right away and make some really interesting actionable results for your organization. We will have a Q&A session, so our marketing team probably has been emailing or using the chat box to respond back to you. But obviously, if you have questions that were not answered during the session, we will collect those and respond to you afterwards. Or if you'd like to go ahead and email me directly and ask me a few other questions or give me some comments, feel free to email me at esther.lavielle@QuestionPro.com. And that is it. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.